This video is going to cover the Netacad Lab 2147, 2.1.47, establishing a console session with TerraTerm. And the note I want to tell you up front is if you are doing this in a virtual environment, if you're using Packet Tracer or NDG Labs or NetLabs or some type of virtual equipment, you're not going to do the first parts here or the part one because you're not going to physically connect to a switch. You're going to do that in the virtual environment. So when we come down here, what you're going to need is one router, a 1941 router, a 2960 switch, some type of PC, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10 works too, because you can run TerraTerm on Windows 10 or Linux if you've got a Linux machine. And I've not tried this on a Google Chrome device, but I may do that in the future just to check it. You're going to need some type of a rollover cable, which is DB9 COM port to RJ45. And I'll make a note that a lot of the newer computers do not have a DB9 switch. So you're going to do something more similar to this. You're going to come USB to RJ45, and that's a rollover. And when you set your software up, you'll have that USB port be your COM port to go out to that. So instead of using a older COM port device there, connection to go to your device, you're going to use a USB. But when you get that connected, you're going to use some type of software. TerraTerm works really well for that. It looks something like that when you get it installed. And you're going to communicate to the port that's going out to that line, that USB line. I don't have a video on this right now, but you can go out on the you can go out and find one. There's plenty of them out there on how to connect TerraTerm and how to do that. And then once you set up your COM port information here, it's usually basic COM1, baud rate's 9600, and that's a throwback to the late 80s, the 90s of when we set up modems, and the baud rate was 9600. And your data rate's 8-bit, parity none. Just gonna leave everything default there. And you should be, if everything's set up properly, if you have your connections made, if you have the software running properly, you should get on your device this screen here, your iOS software, your boot up, and it's going to ask if you want to go through your initial configuration. So what we're going to do is I'm going to switch over to my Packet Tracer, and I'm going to add a couple of these devices, and we're going to do this in the Packet Tracer environment. So it's telling us that we want to do a 1941 switch, a 2960, and a computer or device. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do end devices here, and I'm just going to set up a laptop on here. And then I'm going to go to my network devices, and I'm going to do a 1941 because it said a 1941 and a 2960. So let's go to switches here, and we'll do a 2960. And it doesn't really matter how you set these up on here because we're going to connect to these on that. And let's go back down to our step here. So step one, it says after the switch is completed its startup process, the following message is displayed. Enter no to continue, but we've got to connect our cables here. So in a real world, we would connect our cables. In the Packet Tracer environment, we're going to come in here and we're going to connect to our device and put a cable in. So we're going to come to our cabling here, and we're going to come to our console cable here, and we're going to connect it to our RS-232. We could do USB, but we're just going to go ahead and emulate the DB9, which is the RS-232, and then we're going to put it into our router here, and we're going to come into the console, and let's just double check that's what it's asking us to do here. No, it wanted us to go into the switch. So let me take that console and take it here and put it into the switch. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come in here to our laptop, and we're going to come in here to our software, or our config, excuse me. Check everything out. Our settings here, we're going to leave everything the same. Our software, we don't have any software managing right now. We don't have any things set up, but we're going to go to our desktop here. And on our desktop, instead of having TerraTerm, we're going to have the software called Terminal. And so we're just going to open up our terminal here. We're going to make sure, again, here's the 9600, 8, none, 1, none. We're going to click OK. And that should give us our terminal now. And that is what we're returning. See, it says press enter return. And we're at our switch. And we can do show version. It's going to do our commands here. So first we have to get into when we're in exec mode, when we're in exec mode, we can display the iOS version for the switch. And we know we're in exec mode by our greater than sign. And let me see if I can get this a little bit larger here. Okay, that's a little bit better there. And when we have our switch here, we know we're at the exec mode, both our greater than sign there, and we could just do our show version. And we can shortcut that, so I can just do show VER, which is the same as what they're doing their version, but I can the alias on that. And we're going to get our show version, and it's going to do the more, and then we can do our enter key to go a line at a time, or we can do our space key to get the whole thing. And then we can scroll up and we can show our version information here on our switch. And this one's showing 12.2. Our image is 2960. There's our model number. One switch, 26 ports. And that's the same thing it's showing there. And it's, that's going to show our image file there. And so you can see which iOS image version is currently in use by your switch. This one here is going to be different than what's on our actual switch over here. So if we come over here, you can just set and say, okay, what's the current version that's running? And you can come up here and check to see what your current version is running. And here we're looking at, there's our information right there. Got our software there, compiled on 12 October. There's our ROM information. And there's all of our information that we're looking for. And then it's wanting us to come in here and configure the clock. We're going to come in and we're still exec mode. So we're going to do show clock. And we're going to say our clock is set to March 1st, 1993. So it's going to tell us we need to now go into privileged exec mode. So let me move this over here just a little bit so I can see this at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our enable command. Or you can shortcut it and just put EN. And then it's going to tell us to do the clock set. So we're going to use the command clock space set ? And the question mark is letting us know what commands we have. We can do current time, or we can set it, and our format is hours, minutes, and seconds. And then we're going to type that in. We're going to set, and instead of question mark, we're going to type in our actual time right there. And you're going to type in whatever time you're running at that time. Now, and you have to remember that this is the 24-hour clock. So if you're in the afternoon, starting at 1 o'clock, it's 1300, 4 o'clock is 1600, and so forth. 8 o'clock is 2000. And then you're just going to need to set it based on the 24-hour clock. So you'll just need to convert that. And it's just easy to do if you've not used that before. Just at 1 o'clock starts at 1300, and then it just goes from there. So it's just you're counting 24 hours instead of 12 hours. So if it's mine's 940, but let's just say it's let's just go ahead and set it to what it's saying here. It's saying 308 or 1508. So we're going to say 1508, and we have to put the seconds in too, because if you don't do that, it won't be. And then we space question mark, and that's going to tell us what we can set next. And now the question mark is saying what commands do we have available to us. And so now we have these commands available to us. And that's a little bit more than what we had on this version that is showing here. Or let's see, yeah, month and year. So now we're going to set our October 26, 2012, but let's just go ahead and set the date here. And let's just say September 7th, 2016. So we're going to say SEP 07, 2016. And then if we space question mark again, it's saying the only command available to us is the carriage return. And so now we can do show clock. And now we've got our correct time in there. 15:03:08 on Wednesday, September 7th, 2016. And on here on part 3, it's just saying access a Cisco router using a mini USB console cable. That's just the mini USB. And that's on instead of the RJ45. The newer devices are using mini USB to connect, so you can have a USB on your computer side and the mini USB on the device side over there. And it's the same thing. You're just going to connect to it. And on there, if you're going to do that, you can enable your Windows 7, your Windows 10 for your USB to have a COM port. And so you have to go in and set that. What I recommend you do is your computer that you normally work on. What I have done in the past is just taken an older laptop, and I just use that older laptop to do my configuration on my Cisco or any of my networking devices that I have to connect into. And that way I don't have to set up any special device. I've got an older laptop. I've got the software set up on it. I've got the cable set for it. And then I know it's available for me to then go pick up, and then it's in the server room or somewhere close to my devices. And then I can go in and I can move around and connect console into my devices if I'm not doing it through the network. And the rest of this lab is just showing you how to do that on a Windows 7. If you've got a Windows 10 or a Windows 8, it's going to be similar. Just be careful when you're doing these to, make sure that you know what you're doing on updating your software drivers and updating that. So you're going to have to go get the Cisco drivers for that. It'll walk you through on how to do that. It does work. I've walked through it. I've done it myself on a Windows 7 machine. I've not done this on a Windows 10 machine, but I believe it's the same. And then at the end, you're going to get your serial device. You're going to have it go through your Cisco serial, and it's going to be your USB device. And then on the questions down here, you're going to say, you're just going to answer these questions here. How do you prevent unauthorized personnel from accessing your Cisco device to the console port? That's easy. You've got physical security. And then what advantages and disadvantages of using a serial cable connection compared to USB console connection to a Cisco router? So you want to research that question and answer that. Okay, that's a quick overview of this lab. Just make sure you go through all the steps. Again, if you're in the virtual environment, you're not going to be physically doing part 1. That's the physical connection, but you're going to do part 2, display and configure the basic device settings. And in this case, we configured the clock on here. We showed the version, we configured the clock, and that was it. So if you have any questions, just leave a comment below and subscribe to see when other videos are posted.